So I'll start out here quickly introducing the panel. Each of us will speak for just a couple of minutes and then we'll throw it open to questions and discussion. But again, I'm Ken Jacobs. I'm the chair of the UC Berkeley Labor Center. For those of you who don't know the Labor Center, we're over on Channing Way. We're the outreach arm of the university that works with labor in California and workers' organizations. And a lot of great literature on us on the table here. This is Harley Shaiken, who is the director of the Center for Latin American Studies and a professor in geography and education here at Berkeley, and long time involved in labor issues. And here we've got Shonda Roberts, who's one of the leaders of the Fight for 15 in Northern California. I first met her 3 years ago, she said, when we were both testifying in Sacramento at a hearing. And Shonda herself was fired for her work by KFC and with a big campaign similar to what we just saw up there. They just got her job back. And some people here are So I just want to quickly note that I think that the film really illustrates the challenges that face workers when they try to organize in the United States and create a union, in terms of the incredible legal obstacles that are put in people's way, in terms of the actions employers do around illegally firing workers, threatening to shutting down. And also illustrates some of the really incredible things we've been seeing in recent years with, despite all of these kinds of obstacles, or trying to find ways to work through them, the real rise of these sort of worker center type organizations, groups like the Laundry Center, or the Laundry Workers, like the Restaurant Opportunity Center, Guest Workers Alliance in New Orleans, and then of course the Fight for 15, where folks have really come together and are looking at different kinds of ways to organize and different kinds of ways to operate. And what's really astonishing around when we look at this moment right now, on the one hand, you can say labor has really become much weaker institutionally, and the fights and attacks on labor are really incredible around the country. And at the same time, with things like the Fight for 15, we're seeing an extraordinary movement around the country, leading to all these minimum wage victories, $15 an hour in Seattle and San Francisco and Los Angeles, amounts that we never would have, that people would not have thought possible a short time ago. It's really changed people's view of what can be done and what needs to be done, and people are winning, but of course their demand is 15 and a union, and there's a lot to do, both to get 15 more broadly, but also in terms of to get a union, or in terms of raising wages more broadly, and to get a union. So with that, I will hand it over to Harley.
It was an inspiring story, period. Low-wage work, we've gotten used to the expression. It's an oxymoron. Low wages and work are in conflict with each other, and yet it's become the standard for so many industries in the United States. The damage is so real for the workers involved, as we saw, particularly if they're undocumented immigrant workers who are the most vulnerable. But it's damaging for the family, it's damaging for the community, it's damaging for the future. It really undermines all that could be possible that benefits everyone. And the flip side of these low wages is low purchasing power, which slows growth and damages the economy. I think what was so inspiring here is to see a small place where workers were really able to do something that defied all odds. And in a way you could summarize it in 2 words. Dignity, which was what they were struggling for, the wages, the respect, and a word, dignity. And the second word is solidarity, which was the strategy and the tactics and the approach. It is a profound democratic right to join a union. It ought not to be something that makes someone a candidate for martyrdom. So it is inspiring. It's something we can all learn from. And it's something that offers a glimmer of hope to where we might go.
Seeing that documentary for myself is very, very, very touching, very emotional, because I can sympathize with everything that they went through. As far as being retaliated against, that pretty much happened to myself. I just was reinstated not even a week ago, you know, for organizing my coworkers to make sure that the workplace is running adequately, supplies that are needed for us to do our jobs properly, us getting our 10-minute breaks, which we haven't been getting, and some of us has been working there for 10 plus years. So you can just imagine how long this has been going on. But it took a person, a sacrificial lamb, which is myself, to be able to have the courage to speak up and have demands that will positively affect all of my fellow coworkers and make the workplace a better environment to work in. So with that being said, solidarity is what got my job back. It wasn't that I was that sacrificial lamb. It was everybody coming together. The love from all the organizations that I've participated with in their actions, just, you know, speaking at events like this, sharing my testimony and you know, talking on the work or speaking on the work conditions that were happening in the store, and just coming together. And I think what we're lacking right now in this society is empathy. I cried through this whole documentary. Like, I want to cry now, but I'm not going to. I'm going to try not to, but because solidarity is basically telling your fellow sister or brother, comrade, I love you. Because I empathize with what you're going through. You know, this could be one of you out here, a college student, actually working at a McDonald's or a KFC, working your way through college. This could be an adjunct professor, you know, not having a adequate contract, you know, working only a couple of hours a day. So this can affect not just a fast food worker, but this affects a Berkeley student. This affects an adjunct professor. This affects home care workers. This affects daycare providers. This affects security guards. So this touches all realms. Solidarity goes beyond fast food. It touches every working sector of the United States of America, and we need to support one another in every aspect you can think of, and the only way you can do it is getting out there and supporting. I'm calling on the day of action, November 10th. Fast food workers, the Fight for 15 is going out November 10th nationwide, and we are asking that we get UC Berkeley students. I don't know who was here by the raise of hands, who was out in the streets for 15. Okay, we have a few. I see some of my rads out here. So I'm asking for everybody in this room today. I'm gonna pass out some flyers and I'm asking everybody to come and stand in solidarity, because if it was you going through something that affected your family, like this you seen on this beautiful documentary depicted so well, we would be out there fighting for you. This is everybody's struggle, not just, you know, students. It's everybody's struggle. So I'm done.
Grab your flowers?
Yep.
There they are. All right. Questions?
Any questions? Anybody?
Okay, so I'm a science major, first year at Berkeley. I was wondering if Center for Latin American Studies sees expanding educating workers in the undocumented community, because most workers in the undocumented community are just grateful for having a job and having employment. So they don't realize, well, they know that they're being exploited, but that feeling of exploitation gets overridden by their gratefulness towards their patron for giving them work. Like, do you see somehow the Center of Latin American Studies spreading the knowledge out there for people that are in the undocumented community that don't have access to that knowledge to somehow get access to it?
Understand their rights.
I think that's absolutely very much a part of the Center for Latin American Studies. We are part of a public university, and I think that's part of a public responsibility for people to understand the fundamental rights they have or ought to have in a democracy. Undocumented workers are the most vulnerable workers because of their legal status. But they are not the only ones that are affected by that. If they are so vulnerable and so abused, then all workers feel that, because that sets the standard for workers, legal or undocumented. That's why we know immigration reform is so central and so urgent, and we also know that it's not going to happen anytime soon in a fundamental way. So at least educating people and building a broader awareness that the rights of workers ought to be respected regardless of their legal status. Thank you.
Yeah, what is it basically that protect, in this film particularly, what is it that protected these workers from not just being threatened with like ICE enforcement or just being, yeah, like what is it that protected them from the bosses just being like, hey, we're going to call immigration down here tomorrow, shut up?
I think an important part of that is the overall values of the community. Someone said in the film, New York is a union town. That's not incidental to this. The broad power and the activities of unions do set the standard. I'm not sure it would have happened that way in South Carolina. In New York, the percentage of the workforce that are union members is 24%. It's the highest in the nation. In South Carolina, it's 1.9%. It's that broad awareness and unions that have been very active on issues of worker rights, regardless of immigration status, that set the standard, which would make it very difficult simply to call ICE in or to call any immigration authorities in to essentially weaken or destroy what workers were seeking to do here.
Just say it is it is illegal to do that in terms of bringing in immigration authorities during a union conflict, and in fact there are visas that people can get if they're retaliated against in that way. That said, it's one thing to have the law, which is on people's side. It's another thing to enforce that law, and that comes from the organizing and the power.
Cool. So there are actual legal protections.
There are legal protections, but that doesn't say this stuff is not done all the time. Workers are routinely fired for organizing a worker. In terms of the cases around employers calling immigration, all this stuff happens.
Right.
And so unless people are very highly organized and have that kind of backup that Harley mentioned, those laws don't get enforced, and we've seen this over and over.
If I could make one more comment, I agree certainly with what you just said. And unions deserve important credit here. They're not alone. There are church groups, there are human rights groups, there are a whole range of organizations that are out there, and in some cases increasingly environmental groups have really realized that as all of us have our own fates tied up with this. So these are critical issues, and they're at the very heart of what a democracy is all about. Respect for people.
In the front.
Hi, thanks so much for putting this on. I'm from the law school. I just had one comment and one question. Rock, which was kind of sort of shown a little bit in the movie Restaurant Opportunity Centers United, is opening up a new worker center in Oakland called Rock the Bay. So if people are interested in getting involved with that and their new cooperatively run restaurant that they're establishing right here in the Bay Area, look it up online, come talk to me after this. But I just have one question about the film. I noticed that the discussion about paying minimum wage and overtime kind of didn't seem like it was part of the discussion of the contract towards the end. I mean, they were talking about benefits, they were talking about paid vacation. I just wanted to make sure that part of their contract was that they were going to be making minimum wage and getting paid overtime. Or if anyone knows these stats, I don't know if anyone knows. was
Anyone?
how that went.
I thought with even the previous employer that they did do retro for unpaid wages, so I'm assuming that that was already established, that they were just adding to it with a new employer. That's how I read it anyway. So I think, yeah, that
And
was
that would be
already
under the
established.
guidelines of the law, right?
Yeah.
Got the gentleman in the burgundy right there.
This story seems maybe, well, my question is about the public perception of unions. And this story seems different than what sometimes I think the public perception of unions might be. Maybe for a much larger union, something like the auto workers union or something. And so I think that that's a part of this story too, is people understanding what smaller unions are like and differentiating that from, I think there's a lot of negative public perception of unions. So I don't know if you can comment on that.
Great. Since you've mentioned the auto workers, I'll hand it over to Harley in a second, since that's one of the top, if not the top expert in the country. But I have to say, just on that note, there's a lot of things out there in terms of public perception of large unions, but we have Service Industries International, Service Employees International Union, who's been the key group behind supporting the fight for 15, is an incredibly large union, and has done amazing work with organizing low-wage workers. And that's true for unions across the board. I mean, I think there's a lot out there in terms of that we hear around negative parts of unions, but it's important to understand what a union is. And a union is an organization of workers, and as they get bigger, that's it. When you're fighting big bosses, unless you get big, it's hard to have the power to fight those big bosses. And so, not everything everyone does is perfect at any given time, but it is the sort of major organized bulwark for working people that provides that counterbalance in society. And as that gets weakened, that has implications across the board. And we know that when unions are stronger in terms of what that does in terms of inequality overall, for what that does in terms of share of income going to workers versus going to employers, around discrimination, etc. It's essential for democracy to have large unions to provide that role, and knowing that not everything's perfect at every moment.
I think you're raising an excellent point about perceptions. Perceptions of unions in many areas are negative. But we should also remember that in recent polls, Gallup and others have found that over 50% of Americans have a positive impression of unions. Both these things fit together, but addressing the negative perceptions are critical. Some are implied that we automatically accept and shouldn't. For example, if workers win, the employer loses. Hot and crusty. At 2nd Avenue and 63rd. We saw the new employer, we saw the Workers Association. Those workers are going back to work highly motivated, very positive of what they're doing. And in fact, the higher wages, the better benefits they receive might make it an even more successful deli in New York.
Yes, sir.
So we shouldn't simply assume workers more, employers less. In this case, workers more, employers benefit, and the community comes out better. The second dimension of this, if we go back to when unions were a much larger percentage of the workforce, say in the mid-1950s, when unions represented 1 out of every 3 workers, the general feeling for all American workers, union or non-union alike, is if the auto workers won a better contract, terrific, because we'll soon be next. And if we're non-union, our employers will give us more to avoid a union. Today, over time, and this didn't simply fall out of the sky, it took a lot of pressures, a lot of hammering at it. The notion is, if a unionized worker has good health benefits and I don't, why should they have it? And it's turning around that perception, returning to the broad solidarity that Shonda spoke about so eloquently. That's also part of the picture. So all of this is not going to happen overnight, But all of this, I think it's critical to address.
Yeah, somebody back there with the black and gray.
Hamida, thank you for sharing about the importance of solidarity between different workers of all levels in this area. I'd love for you to speak a bit more about the type of team in the Berkeley Oakland area and how we can get involved. And then secondly, just a question I had when watching the film was the role of the two Caucasian folks, the guy who is a lawyer and the woman who is also helping out. Tell us a little bit more about the role of other people helping with the movement who are not necessarily the minimum wage workers themselves, and how we can help.
Well, on the flyer that I just passed out to you for November 10th, in Berkeley, we'll be at a committee meeting to raise the minimum wage. Berkeley is thinking about raising their minimum wage to $19, and I'm pretty sure that will affect everyone sitting in this room that attends UC Berkeley, right? So, I mean, isn't that would be a major triumph for everybody that lives in the city of Berkeley. So that's another way that you can participate in and show your solidarity is come to that committee meeting, you know, and pressure Berkeley committee councils, you know, persuade them that, you know, Berkeley needs a livable wage, you know, at $19, they're gonna be setting the standard for every surrounding city, you know, sister city to raise their minimum wage. Like Oakland right now is at $12.25, and we couldn't have done that, you know, with the help of, you know, eBase, which is our other sister organization we work with, you know, FAME, which is the community, the religious community sector of it. You know, we're linked up with so many different, you know, sister organizations, and that's the beautiful thing about it. Our organizers working with the Fight for 15, you basically build a family. Like, even though the workers, we are already family because we share the same struggles, but working so closely with our organizers, our lead organizers, I mean, I can only speak for myself. I've been in the campaign for 3 years. I'm a co-founder of the East Bay Organizing Committee. I've been in it from day one, and I built a significant rapport with you know, my organizers, with sister organizations. Like I said, what I put out is exactly what I expect in return is love and solidarity. I show support, you know, whenever somebody needs me, regardless. Like, we just had one of my sisters in the union, in the Fight for 15 campaign, lose her job. I mean, this is happening back to back in less than 2 weeks. It was another leader that got fired from the McDonald's on 45th and Telegraph, and that was a week right after I got fired. So, and it's not a coincidence that's right before Action Day. You know, it's 8 days into, you know, Action Day. It's not a coincidence, and what it is it's intimidation. But being the strong individuals that we are, and the loud mouth that I am, I'm gonna support. I'm gonna show solidarity. My saying is solidarity is a new I love you. You know, I'm gonna show you that I love you and I empathize with your situation by coming out and standing on that picket line with you. Just like you heard Oakland sending love all the way to New York City for these workers. You know what I mean? Like, that just touched my heart even more so, because we're on the opposite side of the world, on the opposite side of the coast. You know, and Oakland really touched for these workers, and that needs to happen, not nationwide, but internationally. You know, the Fight for 15 is international as well. You know, we got workers in Japan out there striking with us. We got workers in Brazil. Like, my sister just came from Brazil like a month and a half ago. And, you know, they're out there mobilizing just as well. So, you know, there's a bigger overall picture, you know, and that we're missing a middle class, you know, and all we're trying to do is survive. You know, and make sure that our basic needs are taken care of. And that's what we strive ourselves on. We pride ourselves with that. And, you know, I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't stand for what I believe in. And this is what I believe in. And I will do whatever I have to do to make sure that everybody wins in a whole, you know? So, thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you.
think,
The in the gray, she was right behind her, but
yeah, we're going to have time for one more question, and then we're going to need to wrap up. So go ahead.
So, a few weeks ago, I stumbled upon a direct action that was happening in front of the chancellor's office. And it was a group of food service workers that, some of whom have been working here for over 15 years, fighting to be included into the union. And I'm curious to hear about how the Labor Center and Center for Latin American Studies or other centers like it within the university support these movements in multiple ways, sort of in how. So I'm hoping that you can speak to that.
So we have two major roles in terms of the Center for Labor Research and Education, Labor Center. We do both sides of that. We do research on labor employment issues that are important for the working people, including lots of studies recently around minimum wage, high cost of low-wage work, green jobs, black workers, a whole host of areas that we're doing work on the research side, including looking at many of the things like subcontracting, what's happening with subcontracting, which has been one of the big issues around on campus, as well as training programs for leadership training programs, unions and work organizations engage in on a wide set of areas. And we have a labor summer program that people here might be interested in. There's an internship program every summer where workers can get, or students can get placed with a union or a community organization and learn firsthand what it's like to do either organizing or labor research. So we have a wide set of programs that we do that are available to people that can help illuminate and do training in the kinds of areas that we're talking about tonight. So check us out.
The Center for Latin American Studies is an organized research unit. It works in a wide range of areas. It has a strong concern for immigrant workers, undocumented immigrant workers, and work more generally in Latin America and in the United States. It has done a number of studies, and it has brought in a number of people who work on these issues very directly. And with the Labor Center, last semester we brought in the recently retired president of the UAW, Bob King, who was very active on many of these issues and ideas while he was here. And someone earlier mentioned ROC. We work closely with ROC on a number of issues, as well as other groups.
I wanted to make a correction on something that was stated.
Sure, go for it.
Sorry, just a couple of minutes. So, University of California is actually exempt from the local laws. Actually, it can be exempt from some of the state laws. So to fight for 15, even though there's this $15 wage, or Berkeley trying to fight for $19, it does not apply to UC Berkeley workers because we are exempt from local laws. But with that said, this shouldn't take away from the solidarity because Janet Napolitano just recently said, okay, we'll do $15 an hour, effective in 2017. So the solidarity does put pressure on people to have to do what is just. But with that said, Janet Napolitano announced, okay, we'll do $15 minimum wage, and guess what she did the next day? She gave the chancellors who make more than $500,000 a raise. So that's just something that you need to keep in mind about employers not like losing. No, they're definitely, they have the money, they're just not giving it to the service workers. So that's something that you kind of need to be aware of, that UC is exempt from a lot of the laws, and it's a different fight. And I'm part of a union that runs 40,000 workers within UC, and it's a bigger fight for us because of this predicament. So, but with that said, the solidarity does help us.
didn't you just have somebody get fired on campus though?
No, it's $32.99 after me. I'm part of Teamsters.
Oh, okay, because we had an action here, yeah.
The contracting stuff.
Allison, did you have the last word?
Well, just check out the student labor committee at UC Berkeley, and they just occupied. They occupied the employer, the subcontractor cleaning after the event, like all the football games, and actually got to work and they dispatched her job back, and the union janitor contractor the union workers went in solidarity for the non-union subcontracted cleaners. So student labor action committee, I'm way too old to be part of it now, but it is a word, I'm pretty sure.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for coming tonight.